Here my wife Paula and I are in Borneo a few years ago photographing little woolly bats. These bats only weigh 4 grams. That's less than a U.S. nickel. They were thought to be impossible to keep in captivity because they were way too small and fragile. But having done this many times, I persuaded my colleagues there to allow me to try. And as you can see, it worked pretty well. Why am I having to set up a picture like this in my studio instead of doing it in the wild? Well, let me show you. This is what I'd have had to work in the wild. It would have been raining on me about every 20 minutes. And I wouldn't have had any idea which pitcher plant the bat was going to come to next. And it would have been a real mess. But working in the studio, I could set up a set where in the picture you cannot tell that I wasn't out in the swamp. But in addition to the photography you can do by having tame and trained bats, there's all kinds of special research you can do. Once my colleagues Michael and Carolyn Schoner understood that you could keep these bats in captivity and tame them, and they would go ahead and perform natural behavior under captive conditions, they learned that these bats had the highest frequency echolocation ever found in a mammal, 300 kilohertz. They learned about the reflectiveness of pitcher plants and exactly how it guided the bat in as they came in. They learned all kinds of things that they couldn't learn beforehand. Now, this is that same bat. Is he attacking me? No. Here's what happened. The night before, I tamed him and got him used to eating out of my hand so that he wouldn't be afraid of me when we wanted to take pictures. When Paul and I came in the next morning, I no more than came in the studio and he started pestering me. He wanted to be fit. He was training me. And he wasn't going to let go until I held up a mealworm. This bat had never seen a human before in his life, had never eaten a mealworm before the night before, had never probably ever caught anything stationary out of a hand, and yet he knew to keep bumping me in the face until I held up my hand and then came and took the mealworm. Now, if you think that's incredible, I've got an even better story for you. This woolly bat is a different species of woolly bat found in Taiwan. I was funded to go to Taiwan several years ago to teach biologists there how to photograph bats chasing down crop pests, prey. Unfortunately, when we got there, it poured down rain day in and day out. We couldn't catch any bats to work with until 48 hours before we were supposed to leave the country. And there's nothing more difficult than a real authentic chase. That's not photoshopped. That's a real authentic chase. So I figured I was just going through the motions because they had funded me to do it, that there was no way of getting this picture at that point. The first night in captivity, this bat turned out, you know, each bat, just like people, has its own IQ and personality. This bat decided to be one of those that just was not going to cooperate. He wouldn't touch a mealworm to eat one out of my hand. I knew, and in fact, this was a new species just discovered. And I was going to be in a heck of a lot of trouble if big-time conservationists killed the first specimen of a new species. And so I gave up part of my collection of live moths, which were precious to me, put them in the studio flying around, and went away to see if he would catch some of them on his own so that he could at least be kept alive without starving until the next night. Came back a few minutes later and there were wings on the floor, so I thought, okay, so he'll at least survive here. The next night, this bat still had not eaten one thing from my hand, still had not eaten a mealworm. I had only rubbed him on his face, trying to get him to accept the idea that they might be good if he opened his mouth. But I come in the next evening, and before I even got to the studio, he's flying over, landing on the side of the studio trying to get to me. I go in the door, and he immediately flies up and starts bumping me in the face, just like the Hardwick's woolly bat in Borneo. I was incredulous. The bat turned out to be so smart that we actually got one of the finest pictures I've ever taken in my life of a real chase, a bat chasing a moth. That very evening, we were able to train the bat so that in just a few tries, he knew not to just fly around, that I wouldn't release a moth while he was flying because I wouldn't know where he was coming from and couldn't get my shot. So he learned he had to go sit in a certain place in my studio before I would release a moth. Only then would he come, and because he was such an incredible quick learner, I got that picture, which I must say I'm more than a little bit proud. Saved my image in Taiwan too.